Okay, I got bumped before I could do the final little rim chamfers on here, so this won't get saved, or this won't get saved to my Instagram feed, but I'll try and save it to my YouTube channel. So at this point, I had gotten the mouth feel of the top of the bowl the way I wanted. And what I need to do now is my lips are very good at telling me where the taper is not quite right here. And I can adjust that by adjusting the underside. So it's telling me that I'm a little too thick here and that I've got a little bit more weight here to remove. But before I do that, I want to take the tiniest chamfer that I can with the hook knife on the inside rim. And this is a super crucial stage. These micro chamfers are really important. I got a fly down by my ankle. Micro chamfers are really important for making a spoon that is super comfortable in your mouth. So okay, good. Good. A little bit more here. Okay, so now that I've got those micro chamfers done, now I'm going to switch to adjusting the outside of the bowl of the spoon. And again, putting in my mouth, I can feel that this curvature here in the middle could stand to have some weight removed. And I'm doing these with thumb pushes. And what I'm doing is I'm just sort of overlapping these thumb pushes so that I maintain a sort of smoothly faceted surface. And I'm maintaining a little bit of thickness on that rim. It's hard to get it to focus on it, but you can see I'm maintaining a tiny little thickness on the rim there. And I'm trying to get these thumb pushes to get the thickness down where I remember it needing to come down. It's a matter of sort of paying attention when it's in your mouth and envisioning where it is on the bowl of the spoon. And then you go and remove that, and then you put it back in your mouth and you see if you're better. Oh yeah, that's much better. Much, much better. All right, so what often starts to happen is sometimes on the back of the spoon here, there starts to be this line that if I pay attention to it, I can get to look sort of like the flukes of a whale tail, where the grain changes and I would need to cut the back shoulders of the bowl in the other direction. So I'm going to do it and then show you guys what I'm talking about. It doesn't always work out that this happens, but when it does, I like to leave it and sort of make it as clean as I can. So you see that line there where you get this sort of sharp line? I don't usually set out to have that happen, in part because if I set out to have it happen, I end up leaving too much material here, and you feel that. But if it happens in the process of this final thinning out, I tend to leave it because it's nice. Good. Just checking the flex, making sure I'm not going too thin. And then I'm just if I was, depending on what I was shooting for in terms of a surface finish. So right now I'm mostly just trying to remove facet lines and but in a very loose sort of way. I'm not trying to get it absolutely perfect. Okay, good. Okay, so now, much better. I don't know how people carve spoons without putting them in their mouth. So now the last couple cuts I'm going to make, first of all, I'm going to trim up the outside. So I'm not going to try and do a continuous cut. Instead, I'm going to look for places where there appear to be bumps, and I'm just going to shave off just those bumps. If you try and cut a completely new line, chances are you're going to botch it up. And just by removing the worst of the bumps, even crudely, goes a long way towards fooling your eye into thinking that the rim is really a perfect curve, even when it's not. So, now that I've got that trimmed up, I'm going to do an angled chamfer on the outside here. Yeah, of course, man. I'm going to do an angled chamfer like this on the outside rim. That is going to leave the tiniest little chamfer before it gets to the inside rim, because I want to avoid making a sharp little corner on the top of the rim. I'll just knock off that. And you can see how everything is happening with just the tip of the blade, right? I'm not doing this down here because you don't have nearly as much control. I'm using just the tip of the blade, and I'm doing everything really choked up in my hand. And I'm just using the hand that's holding the knife, isn't really doing any pushing. It's controlling the angle and therefore how much the blade is digging in. So that's enough for that hand to do. And then the actual power is coming from the fingers of these fingers of this hand that are sort of pulling back like that. So that chamfer is good. Finish going around the outside here. Feel a spot where I get quite a good enough chamfer with the hook knife. You have to be careful going in there like this though, because it'd be easy to stab the center of the bowl with the tip of your knife. So now the last chamfer I do is that bottom of the rim, and again I'm just going to knock it off. It's already so thin. It's so thin that there's really not much to take, but it is worth doing. But again, you don't want to completely remove the rim that's there. You want to just knock off the corner of it. But I'm still leaving a tiniest little rim that is perpendicular to the spoon face. It's easy to overcut these and end up sort of chasing them back and forth, having overcut them. But there we have it now. Good. I'm glad I answered another one. Okay, so now have one little spot I'm going to go back into with the hook knife. In general, this is a dangerous thing, going back with the hook knife, because you're going to be tempted to go after everything that's not perfect. I generally don't let myself do it, but that was such a little thing that I could do. The reason I don't let myself go back with the hook knife is that there's always something you can do more with the hook knife, and you're always going to be tempted to try and get something even more perfect, and you'd end up ruining it. So here's this spoon. As you can see, it's fairly symmetrical. And looked at it from the front in terms of the rim curvature. Has a crank that, you know, is functionally this angle up here versus this angle down here. Whatever happens in between doesn't matter. And has a nice curvature on the inside. It's fairly thin. When you put it in your mouth, it just floats out of your mouth without any sharp edges. anywhere. One other thing I'm going to do with a hook knife. Breaking my own rule here. This right here is easy to have not symmetrical. And because it's where it lines up with the handle, it's nice if it does look symmetrical. Okay, so now let's talk about burnishing. So I started off burnishing with a little pebble, then I switched to this antler. It's just real simple. And the antler had this really nice thin straight part where I could do this. But this part of the antler wasn't super easy to use. It works okay, but it never felt particularly made for it. Then I had this pestle, and the inside of the pestle works great, but it also doesn't work particularly well on the handle like this, and the glazed portion doesn't really have the same effect. I'm not sure why. So then I worked with a potter, and he's making this line of ceramic burnishers that are basically the head of the pestle, right, mashed up with the bit of antler that I like. So this is kind of your all-in-one burnisher. So I like that. Those are great. I have a waiting list for those. But then you can use the edge of the burnisher to go around like this. Then I started looking into this thing I read about. Somebody mentioned that I should look into a broomcorn polisher. And I found an article written by Chris Schwartz of Lost Arts Press about polishers. There's a French word for polisher that I don't know how you pronounce it. So I am working with Cynthia Main to make, this is a prototype, so it's not going to look quite like what it will look like in the end, these broomcorn polishers. Now, you have to be careful with these. It is possible for this, particularly when it's first being used, to scratch wood that is still wet. On this particular cherry heartwood, it isn't going to scratch it. But if this were cherry softwood, it would. So you need to be gentle with these polishers. What I've noticed with the broomcorn polishers is that they, and there's this part in the middle here also, that they achieve sort of a smooth polish of a sort that the burnisher doesn't quite get. I think there's a relaxed give to them that is a little bit different. And so you have to be careful in how you use them and not just wail away at your spoon, but you can get a polish with these that is akin to what you find on really fine furniture. And very quickly too. And I've also found, so the first thing I experimented with this was on a serving spoon that I had where the serving spoon had been used a bunch and it was really had that sort of like beat up wooden spoon look to it. And I took the polisher to it and got such a luster on that wood just from the polisher that I really think that that's almost where it shines the most, not in polishing spoons that might still have a little too much moisture in them, but on older spoons that are looking beat up, the polisher just softens everything and makes everything have this luster to it. It's made of broomcorn bound tightly together with twine. So this is just a prototype that I'm working with, and Cynthia's sending me a couple more prototypes, And I have a waiting list for them. If anyone's interested, they're going to be $15, as is the burnisher. So each of these is $15 plus shipping, and I have a waiting list for each. The waiting list for this one, we're talking a couple of months out. The waiting list for this one is probably within the month I'll have them. And you can just reach out and let me know. But again, you can use the sides, you can use the tip, but you do need to be mindful that if you have too much moisture content in your spoon, that these edges here can scratch instead of polish. So it's a matter of getting to understand the wood a little bit more. But I will say and I'm using almost no pressure. Unlike the burnisher, where I'm actually using a fair amount of pressure, with this I'm using almost no pressure at all. And it's more the broom corn texture is doing the polishing rather than and it's, you know, the sort of what you end up with is a finish that's somewhere between knife finished and sanded. It has softened everything to the point where it no longer feels like a knife finished spoon. It feels softer than that, and yet you can still quite clearly see facets.